Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I also direct the Dispute Resolution Center. Welcome to the 249th breakfast, co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York and the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. These breakfasts are organized every month by a wonderful team consisting of Julie Denny, Chuck Newman, Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, and Emily Skinner. We met in person from 9/11 until March 2020 at John Jay College. Since April 2020, we've been meeting virtually. All of these breakfasts are recorded and they're currently posted at the ACRGNY website, www.acrgny.org. And we are in the process of updating our website at the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center. And very soon we will have them all posted there as well. Many of you are wondering whether we'll ever go back in person. It feels like life is a work in progress. We should know if we're permitted to do anything in person soon. We have resumed in-person classes. I just haven't seen large gatherings on campus. As we all know, there are pros and cons to this environment. It was just wonderful meeting everyone over coffee and bagels in person. It's also wonderful just being able to turn on a screen and see so many people from around the world. So we'll let you know if and when we ever meet again in person. We're so fortunate in this environment to be able to invite our colleagues from many parts of the world to be presenters that would not necessarily be possible when we met in person. We always waited for them to come to New York. And we did schedule an awful lot of vacations and trips for people to our wonderful city. Now we don't have to do that. We have everyone joining us virtually. So this morning, we're delighted to have with us Bernie Mayer and Jackie Font-Guzmán, who will be talking to us about their latest work. I'm going to now turn it over to Julie, who will do a more formal introduction. But before that, Emily, I'm going to give you a minute to share information about the upcoming ACRGNY conference, and then we'll turn it over to Julie for a formal introduction.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Skinner. I'm the president-elect at the Association for Conflict Resolution Greater New York, and we are gearing up for our conference starting on May 31st this month. So registration is open. I will put it in the chat. We'll be starting the conference with a kickoff event in New York City with an honoree panel, and then we'll have 3 days of virtual content, jam-packed agenda with lunchtime series, and a lot of amazing presenters. And so I really hope that you all can join us, and we'll have some networking events, and it will be a really great time. And so I look forward to seeing you all there.
And thank you, Emily. And one more, Victoria, if you could take just a minute to share the National ACR Conference info.
Yes. Good morning again, everyone. As she said, I am the chapter director from ACR National, and we are preparing right now for our conference in Orlando. We'd like to invite you guys down. You can, like once I said, the conference is slated for September. It's going to be in September. You are invited to come down and bring your families and have a great time. I'd like to also invite you to become members of ACR National. Once again, please visit our website and for more information, and hope to see you in Orlando, or if you can't go, it will be virtually as well. You can attend the conference virtually. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victoria, who's joining us from Houston, Texas.
And Emily is posting all of these things in the chat. So if you didn't get those websites, they're there. And there's one other announcement. They're hiring people in Queens. So would it be possible to copy that and repost it? Great.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well,
And now on to Julie, who will introduce our speakers this morning. Julie, take it away.
thank you. We have two rock stars this morning. They're such rock stars that their bios as received are long. So I'm going to tell you that they are co-authors of a book, a new book, The Neutrality Trap: From Constructive Engagement to Strategic Disruption. I love it, in social conflict. Bernie Mayer is the author of many, many books. He's a former therapist. You may remember Beyond Neutrality, which was a pretty high profile book. He's an award winner countless times. Jackie Font-Guzmán is a Fulbright scholar, also a multiple award winner. She's executive director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia. And she's professor in their Center for Justice and Peace Building. I love the title of this new book, and we're all looking forward to hearing you two talk about disruption. Take it away, Bernie and Jackie.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me say that because you'll see a slightly different title up here on this screen, that Jackie and I went through a long process. We got the main title right away, but it took us a while to settle on the subtitle, and it ended up being Disrupting and Connecting for Social Change. So anyhow, I want to say hello, and I'm really pleased to be part of this meeting, which I've heard about for a long time, and it's really an honor to be able to present here. And Jackie, do you want to?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm looking forward for the time we'll have together in the next hour or so, and thanks for having us.
I want to interject one thing. If during the course of their presentation you have questions, we're going to ask you to click on, help me out, what is it, reactions, and raise your virtual hand, and we'll call on you when the time is right. And you can articulate your question then. Sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. Well, maybe we'll start by saying what motivated us to write this book and why. And I think there has been a long-term concern, and I think a foundational one for many people in our field and in related fields, which is that if we are totally identifying ourselves in this work as neutral and objective, and our major focus is to bring people together to connect more effectively, important as that may be, it's really only part of the process of how we deal with the major problems we face in our society, community, organizations, families, that only focusing on part of that can be very problematic. And maybe just it's something I've been thinking about in the last 2 or 3 days, and I'm sure other people have in their own way, is what seems to be happening with the Supreme Court and Roe versus Wade. And like maybe other people in this room, I actually was part of efforts to have some dialogues going between pro-life and pro-choice people a number of years back. And looking back at it, that was never really going to, on its own, deal with the problem or prevent what we face now. I'm not saying I'm sorry I did it, but it was, as time goes forward, and people who are concerned about reproductive choice are going to face some very difficult questions. And I don't think we're going to protect reproductive rights without a lot more than dialogue, without a lot more than people just coming together. It really is going to be about, in more generally, building a movement for change. And a movement for change requires not just reaching out to people who are different from us, but also disrupting oppressive systems or systems that perpetuate problems. And the immediate impetus for writing this book really was what happened after George Floyd was murdered, and where there was a lot of anger, and there were a lot of demonstrations, and there were a lot of people on the streets clamoring for some changes. And a lot of people in the conflict fields' response to that was, well, we need to bring the police and the community together, representatives of the police and the community together to dialogue and to discuss their differences and their issues. And I felt, and Jackie felt, although she can speak for herself, that this was really only half the story. And to do that without really understanding we needed to disrupt the system that was oppressive in nature and fundamentally flawed in nature was actually a means of trying to tamp down the energy and the forces for change, and in fact, protect the status quo. So that is what motivated us to write a book that tries to really look at what our role is in social change, how we can both help people connect across our differences and disrupt systems that perpetuate oppression, what we have to bring to the table on this, how we can understand it, what some of the dynamics are, and some of the challenges are. And so that was the deep motivation to begin writing this. Jackie?
Yes, and obviously I agree with all of that, and I echo that, and I would add and build on that, that as for me also as a Puerto Rican woman who has been navigating spaces that are usually male spaces, or spaces being designed for either not woman or not Latinx, that when there were conflicts or when there were systemic issues, usually what ended up happening was our tendency was, and even as conflict professionals, to focus on that individual and say, well, what can we do to solve your problem? What dialogue or conversations we could have? And that in a way, by seeking out to help and support in that way, if I was the person doing the helping, or if someone was helping me, either way, we were being complicit of sustaining a system that was really oppressive, because we weren't getting at the roots of the problem. Like, what were the real roots of the systemic structures that were not allowing individuals from underrepresented groups to actually thrive? And I am confronted with that every day, as I'm sure many of you are, not only in the field and practice of conflict engagement, but even as a person in diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? How much do I actually hold back and do not step in to solve something that I could solve maybe for an individual? Because in the long term, in the long run, what I am doing is actually enabling the system to continue to engage in whatever the action is that is not being inclusive or including the voices of people or giving them the same opportunity. And so that's where, our role then is, should it be that, yes, having conversations and dialogue is absolutely important. We are not saying that it's not, but should we be a little bit more proactive in stepping away from what, at least I think, it's an illusion of the capacity for people to be neutral and objective, and actually is part of our role not also coach people and support systems so that people can disrupt systems. And so that there was a tension there that we needed to hold together if we really wanted significant change, that we needed to connect with people at a relational level and engage in more relational dialogue, relational mediation, relational negotiation, but that in itself wasn't going to be enough, that we should also be finding ways of disrupting, or even maybe not stepping into the rescue of trying to solve a problem. And so for me, all the things that have been happening in the nation and in the US and in the world really, but focusing here in United States and Canada, which we also bring a lot because Bernie is living there, and examples that we really needed to bring these two things together and have conversations as to how we can hold them and how can we really affect change.
You want to move us along this? Yeah. So this is a quote many of you are probably familiar with from John Lewis, who was a long-term congressman and a hero of the civil rights movement. Well, actually, I had the very good fortune of meeting when I did some work in that movement as well, who said, never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And so in a way, that's what we're talking about. And to give a little more context to this, you want to go to the next slide, Jackie? These are the full quotes that's taken from. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is a struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. And what really is important to us about that quote is how many different elements he brings together in that short amount of what we have to hold in order to be really part of dealing with our most essential problems. It is the issue. How do you stay optimistic in the face of all that's going on?
Right.
And I think this week has challenged many of us on how to stay optimistic, on how to take a very long-term view at the same time as to work for immediate change, but take a long-term view of what this is all about. And Ella Baker's quote, many of you are probably familiar with this too, is how important it is for us to look at the systematic roots of what we see as manifestations of individual problems. So, you know, when I think about Ukraine and what's going on at Ukraine, and it's extremely concerning, it is interesting to me how hard it is to really look at the systemic roots of what's going on and how easy it is to just try to understand it all in terms of the behavior of individuals and the personalities of individuals. So one of the chapters in our book is called Beyond Crazy, Stupid, and Evil, Understanding the Systemic Roots of Issues, of Social Problems. And I think that these are challenges that we cannot be too facile about. We have to really understand the challenge of dealing with essential conflict, with deep-seated conflict, dealing with deep-seated social problems means really delving into this stuff in some depth. And that's what we tried to do in the book. So what we want to do in the next few minutes is just highlight a few of the key concepts we have in the book, and then let's just have a discussion. We can't obviously get into all of this in this period of time. So, Jackie, you want to take it?
Yes, and actually one thing that also always strikes me about both of those quotes that were kind of inspirational as we were writing this book is that what we're really asking of ourselves and of others is to imagine a world that has never really existed, that our systems and how they have been created since the inception of this nation has really been about being exclusive and about focusing on setting some people up for success and not others. And so imagining something that has never happened is also a big task, right? How do we then co-create the world we really want to live in through connection and disruption? And I think those are key elements. So I think what we did then, these are just some very brief, we just took a few of the highlights of our book. And Bernie, you want to start? Do you want me to keep on?
Well, I can talk about the neutrality trap.
Okay, go ahead.
Turn it over to you from there.
There we go.
Why the neutrality trap? We've had a long time concern that the identification of what we do with being neutral and objective is problematic. That what in fact we play many different roles in conflict, and a third-party intermediary role is just one of them. But even in that role, neutrality is kind of a false premise. What we really are doing, if we're playing in a third-party role, is trying to help other people have the conversation they need to have, but we're not doing it as passive, neutral, in whatever that term means, and it means something different to almost everybody. We're doing it, we're committed to helping a constructive, meaningful conversation go forward. And we're offering authenticity, we're offering our efforts to be as transparent as possible, to be really committed to genuine empowerment. But if you're really neutral, particularly in the face of significant power differentials, you're not doing anything to really deal with those power differentials in an important way, then almost inevitably you are empowering the more powerful. And we know this. We in family mediation, for example, we've had to confront how that works in dealing with domestic violence, in dealing with environmental disputes. If you don't deal with the fact that oftentimes communities or environmental groups are much more poorly resourced than corporations and large government entities, then you're also you're not conducting a process with integrity. These are very major concerns that we see as a neutrality trap. Related to that is the idea that we can be objective. Again, that's not clear to me what that means to people. We bring to be effective, we bring all of who we are to the table. We need to. We bring our personalities, our sense of humor, our values, our background, and we do it in a way that is hopefully transparent and constructive. But what it is not is some idea of neutrality, which, as many of you know, in different languages basically means something very, very different. It's like being neutral in a car. It means going nowhere or doing nothing. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the neutrality trap.
Yeah, and we also raised the issue of intersectionality and social change. And intersectionality, as many of you know, it's a lot more than just having different identities. What we're really talking about is power. We're talking about how at the intersection of where you sit, whether you are, I mean, it's a very different thing to be a woman than to be a Black woman, than to be a Black woman who is queer, right? There's a lot of intersections, and what that adds is more and more layers of power differentials and oppressions that individuals need to live with and address, and like Bernie said, bring to the table their full self when they're engaging in social movement. So if we are talking about changing structures and systems, then what is going to be our intentionality behind being aware and encouraging that all these intersections are actually represented as we're moving and pushing towards social change? And we hear a lot about people, again, talking about this as well as just different lived experiences. Yes, it is different lived experiences, but there's also power behind and underneath it. And I think what we have done or in our field many times is try to talk about balancing powers. We focus more sometimes on highlighting people's lived experiences and not naming and bringing to the table the fact that there are some serious power differentials. And I think that's where we jump to trying to solve an issue maybe too quickly. So if we're going to really, really, really affect social change for a society and a world that is impacting everyone different, we need to use our skills, our capacity to as conveners to bring people to the table, the knowledge and the expertise we have in terms of what is the relationship between individual experiences and systemic, how systems are operating, We have those skill sets to bring them to the table, and I many times feel we're not fully bringing them because we are trying to be neutral and objective and in a way removed from the process so that we can conduct a process that somehow is fair. And I would challenge that, that we need to not be there. We need to be able to connect and build relationships across our different intersectionalities or work spaces that people are inhabiting. And that means bringing them to the table and authentically letting them to speak. I think some of the things that we reflect on is, and Alicia Garza had some really interesting experiences, and many others who have been women who are activists, saying how they have had to deal with and challenge, the old guard kind of experience where their voices, in the sake of harmony, right? Because we want harmony so that we can focus on our common goal. We don't allow the power that is crushing some people with this intersectionality to actually surface. That our action tends to be, well, let's just have harmony so that we can focus on our common goal. And I think in that process, we're missing out on important components of what these individuals have to contribute. And we saw this in the 50s and 60s with the women's movement for liberation and freedom. So this is not something new. It just seems like we keep on repeating it in many ways. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit specifically about disruption and then about connecting briefly, and then see where we are. Well, when we talk about disruption, what do we mean? I mean, in a technical sense, we're talking about how we disrupt systems that perpetuate problems, whether it's oppression, whether it's the degradation of our environment, whether it's violence, bullying in the workplace, sexual harassment, whatever we're talking about. We're disrupting the systems that perpetuate that and trying to force them to reorganize. And there are a lot of different ways we do it. And this is fairly complex to understand some of the different ways we do it. But just to take a couple of examples, I like to cite something my wife, Julie McFarland, is working on, which is having to do with the major problems of sexual violence, sexual harassment in many institutions in our society. But let's particularly talk about universities for a moment. And one very specific way in which the continuation of sexual harassment is enabled is through the use of non-disclosure agreements. So she and her colleague Zelda Perkins, who was the first person to blow the whistle to break a non-disclosure agreement with Harvey Weinstein, have started an organization called Can't Buy My Silence, which if you're interested, just Google Can't Buy My Silence and all sorts of stuff will come up. And they've started working on the whole issue of getting institutions, but especially universities, but others too, to discontinue the use of non-disclosure agreements to protect people who have engaged in misconduct. And they've already had legislation passed in Canadian province and introduced in many other Canadian provinces. There have been legislation passed in California, in Ireland. It's happening, and in 53 universities now in the UK have signed a pledge not to use it. And this is an example of disruption that has been very strategic and is beginning to force systems to reorganize in a way that I think will be very significant. Obviously, this is relevant to religious institutions and armed forces and corporations and many other issues as well. But we have to understand something about disruption, which is it's not always strategic. It's not always well-disciplined, nonviolent, committed approaches to change. A lot of times the initial reaction to events that highlight oppressive problems is quite chaotic. It's what happened after Dr. King was assassinated, after the people who attacked Rodney King were acquitted, after George Floyd was murdered. What happened was a much less strategic, much more chaotic approach to disruption, which sometimes had violence around the edges. It really was just around the edges, but there was some. And of course, that's what the media focused on. And it's easy to condemn that, but we have to understand that it's important. The chaotic phase is important. It energizes people, it creates attention, it often starts movements. And from there, we also, these movements have to move on, have to become more strategic, more long-term, if they're going to be effective. And that generally means a nonviolent discipline. It means building structures and leadership that can carry on a struggle, both for immediate ends and long-term purposes. So we discuss from our own experiences and from a lot of public conflicts as well. We discuss a relationship between these in the book.
Yeah, and good trouble, we kind of have already been talking. I would just add briefly that one of the things we, I mean, good trouble in many ways is the linkage between chaotic disruption and strategic disruption. Is the kind of trouble that creates chaos and calls attention to something within the system that is not working, but it also then leads us to be able to strategize as to how we can be strategic in that disruption so that it ends in actual change. For me, that's the good trouble that John Lewis brings about, is that it's not only about making noise, right, and calling attention. And those are the ways that we actually can then make the change that we want. And that's the, we bring in a lot of examples also in the book about some of the circumstances where we have engaged or had been in good trouble. And what does that take, right? What does it, it's easier said than done, right? What are the consequences that it has on an individual within a system when they do decide to cause the good trouble? What are some of the things that have helped us navigate those spaces when we have chosen to engage in good trouble within institutions or within communities? And so providing some examples and some stories about, yes, I think it's all great, and I think we need to do it, and I think we need more of that, but also being realistic that this is not something you do by yourself, and this is also something that does have some consequence, as many times, for the individuals that decide to engage in making change.
So let's talk about the connecting side then. What do we think are three essentials? What do we think is essential for meaningful dialogue? We can talk a lot more detail about this, but let's just say we think if you don't have this happening in dialogue about important issues, then something is essential is missing. One is naming the elephant, talking about what the real issue, what the real differences are, what the real concerns are. And sometimes those are issues of race or gender. Sometimes they are issues of the fundamental way in which corporate power is being used in, for example, in environmental issues. But and we have to help people do that in a constructive way, but we have to help them do it. That almost inevitably means telling our stories. Helping dialogue has to include genuine storytelling. That is how people connect. When they hear stories, when they can go back and forth and say something important about how they came to be where they are and how they see things, and hear other people do it. And as we've already said, attending to power dynamics and power differences. Now, I want to say that if we're entering into this in a third party role, and we do have a real commitment to dealing with this, we have to find a way of putting that on the table too. We have to name that particular elephant as well. And so we can talk about how we can do that and still be effective in third party roles. But I've had many examples where I've been in a facilitator role, and I've seen power over stuff happening, and I've had to intervene and try to deal with that and in a way that makes it clear that I'm not committing myself just to let things happen on that nature. Jackie?
Yes, let's just go. So, I mean, if we're talking that neutrality and objectivity and dialogue may not be the same, then what are some of the things that we can bring to the table, right? And I think I think seeing the spaces where we're convening people as spaces of relationship building and storytelling, building on the previous slide, are really essential and crucial. We bring to the table our expertise and our skill sets and our capacity to do that in ways that are effective and in ways that power over is not used, in ways that we can find a space where we're sharing our power in these spaces. The other thing, I mean, I think we bring to the table, I mean, we have a lot of skill sets, right? Our discipline in our field, if we set aside neutrality, objectivity and dialogue, we can share our own stories in a facilitative process that may illustrate to people possibilities of maybe different ways of doing things. We don't need to tell them what to do, but our sharing of our stories are also part of what can help people move along. And we bring that to the table. I think we can bring our authenticity if we just are willing to name things in compassionate ways. I think we also bring to the table and have the capacity to do that linkage between people's individual conflicts and how are they part of a larger system. I mean, when we're talking about things, I'm in the South, in Virginia, when we're talking about things about Confederate flag, it is not an issue between one individual and another one. It goes deeper. It goes deeper into how our nation was built. It goes deeper into what are the symbolic representations of that and racism. It's at a deeper level. We can't really have those conversations that seem to be or appear to be between 2 or 3 people or even within a community without bringing in that larger context. And I think we bring the skill sets to the table to be able to do this. I think what holds us back is trying to be objective and neutral, but we have them. And I don't feel, speaking for myself in the past, that maybe I could have used more of that. And because of the training of try to stay more removed from the conflict, that we don't step fully in. We don't bring our full selves to the table. And I think this is not unique, by the way, of conflict resolution experts, right? I think lawyers do the same. As a lawyer, I can speak more myself that also is something that is embedded in our profession. You see that in healthcare providers, in physicians. Is this not bringing our full self to the table? We can do that. And I think we should. I think we will be a lot more effective if we actually did that. We also bring the capacity to have compassion for those people who their worldview, I mean, certainly someone who has a worldview where somehow another human being is not counted or being discounted as being human, or just is not valued the same as you or someone else, is someone that is in need of a lot of compassion, right? And we also, I think, bring to the table power. As a facilitator and as a mediator, I think we have a lot of power. We're designing processes. We are choosing how we frame a question. We are choosing what question we frame. We have the power to call out racism when it's blatantly and we're seeing it, as opposed to reframing and being more of a neutral stand. We have the power to do all of that. And I think we should bring fully all of that to the table. Bernie?
Well, I think we should just open this up.
Yep.
and get reactions. This is the
Yep.
contents of the book. People wanted to see.
Yep.
We thought maybe table contents.
Yep. This is just the outline to give you an idea of what we did. And then we just want to say briefly before we open it up for conversations, Bernie and I will be teaching June 6th through 10. It's a 5-day in-person which can't believe it's happening. I can't remember the last time I taught in person. It will be a 5-day 2-credit class. It could be taken for credit or not for credit. And we will be, during those 5 days, digging deeper into how we can put into practice what we're sharing in our book. And I think with that, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and engage us in conversation.
Alan Marks has a question. You're muted. When you have a question, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this presentation. It seems to me that there's two minds in the room. One is your job as a mediator is not your job to educate and move the dial. And I disagree with that, probably because I'm not a mediator and I'm not committed to it, but I am committed to the change. And there's a lot of things you said that really I have questions about. I find that the biggest problem, at least from what I'm seeing, is that the disruption is caused by people in the status quo who are looking to maintain and control their power. And they will throw divisiveness into the arena between people who could join coalitions, who then fight between themselves and never get to the kinds of things you're talking about. Something was said about the people who are holding power about needing compassion, and yet those are the very people who don't have any compassion. So you're talking about having compassion for people who don't have compassion. We're looking at issues like, let's just talk about abortion being thrown into an arena. Now everybody is fighting about abortion, and there is a distraction from going after those very people in the status quo who we're getting close to now with all of the documentation, in spite of the big lie and don't believe anything. So I'm wondering how. I agree with you that violence is necessary as a catalyst, but once it's thrown into the arena, it runs against what you're trying to get done. You're taking on huge balance of power. And I think that the issue, I think at a granular level, must be when people do not feel empowered, how much of that can you really get them to shift with, when what they really want is an immediate solving of the problem that they are facing, whatever that problem they imagine it to be, rather than what you're talking about, which is the deeper, bigger picture?
First of all, you raise a very important point, that disruption happens from all directions. Where I live in Canada, just 20 minutes down the road is the most busy border crossing in North America, the Ambassador Bridge, where truckers blocked it and stopped. The auto industry stopped. I was trying to get back and the bridge was blocked, but I was trying to get back home from a trip. So and that was certainly not something I saw as on the right. I didn't agree with them, although their tactics were really interesting.
Brilliant.
There's no question that it can be used, and it can be used by people in power. And the most important example, I think, or a very important example, is the centuries-long practice of turning working class people against each other. Particularly, for example, people of color on the one hand, the white working class against another, in the interest of preserving the power of the elite. Now, I don't think our role is simply disruption. It is connection, and one of the connections our role is to help people within a movement. That's some of the most important stuff I think we can do, is help bring people who are natural allies but are divided, to help them begin understanding and talking with each other and coming together. And that's I just want to say one other thing. I want to also make it real clear. I'm not saying violence is necessary. In fact, I think violence is often really harmful, even in a chaotic stage. I just think we ought to understand the role that the overall chaotic, unpredictable nature of certain kinds of disruption plays. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. The thing is, you're talking about bringing people together, and I'm wholeheartedly in agreement that we need coalitions and we need to join people across bounds. However, people fight for their self-interest. And if they do not see what you're talking about, if they do not see the bigger picture, they are not going to join into coalitions. How do you get people to stop fighting for their piece of the pie, if you will, long enough to understand that their piece of the pie is being given to them by people who have the pie, the knife, everything needed for that division, and that those choices are, historically speaking, since the dawn of time, in the hands of the powerful, however they seize power. You talk about the elite, and I'm saying we're sitting at a table with the elite. All of the intelligentsia sitting at this table are as elite in our side as those people who have planned for 20 years to take away abortion rights. So we need people of balance, good hearts and good minds, in order to make what you're talking about possible. And I see that that's where the battle is, at least from my perspective.
Well,
So I
that's,
think, go ahead, Bernie, I'll wait.
I just think there's other people that have some questions maybe. Go ahead, Jackie.
I just wanted to clarify just one thing also, that I mean, the divisiveness is an old trick, right? We saw it already with voting rights and woman versus Black and how they were divided. I do think, though, that those of us that are in underrepresented groups very clearly understand that that is happening. We know it, we live it every day. We live in a system that was not built for people like us. We understand it. And I mean, I see it every single day, and I'm living that experience. I do think that what happens is you have to balance the capacity for I mean, the need, actually, not the capacity, the need for survival within a system and the navigation of that system as you're also changing it. I also do strongly believe that when we're talking about relationships and connection, we also need to connect across people that are different than us and not just those that are the same, right? Because otherwise we stay within our own bubble. And that many times means reaching out to a person that, if I am, pro-choice, someone who is anti-abortion. And that does mean many times, if someone is racist, reaching out to them. And the reason I feel we need to have compassion is not the same as saying we cannot call them out or be firm in terms of what you're doing is wrong. But I think we need to do it in a compassionate way, because whatever experiences they've had, whatever they lived experiences have had, if I cannot, for speaking for myself personally, if I cannot have those conversations with compassionate and caring, I feel I'm not escalating differences or conflict in a way that is productive. And so the society is built by all of us. I really do believe that someone who has a worldview that is so dehumanizing actually needs to have a lot of compassion from my end. Does that mean that I will agree with him? Does that mean that I will let it pass and let them make racist comments if that's the situation? Absolutely not. So that's just kind of what I wanted to share. There may be other people actually.
I have the following order: Shakira, then Mark Laster, then Miriam, then Francine. So Shakira, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation and for writing this book. I really empathize with what Alan is expressing, and I particularly appreciate the issue of power that you all are dealing with in your book, because I think that this is, I think, for me, the toughest issue. I am right now serving in a nonprofit organization. Like, it's nonprofit, but it's an organization that has been driven and led by volunteers for 35 years. And it's been fighting for reparations for people of Black African descent. And right now, the challenge is around power dynamic among the leaders, among the couple of leaders in the organization. They are engaging in secrecy and hiding that is not allowing the full board to appreciate and operate the way that they can in contributing to this really important goal and objective, which everyone says they're committed to. So what my question is, or my inquiry is, what have you seen that enables mediators, facilitators to address toxic power dynamics among leaders that really short circuit the capacity of the organization to perform, and specifically, like they kind of word things in a way that misleads many of the members. So members are making decisions without full information. And because I'm staff, they have intentionally cut me out of the board meetings where, all of their decisions are being made, but they're making horrible decisions because the leaders are hiding information. How have you seen this, and do you have ways of disrupting and redirecting the power of the power capacity of the leaders to kind of loosen their grip on the organization so that others in the organization can make contributions that are meaningful? I don't know if I've made any sense, but that's what I'm grappling with.
Mhm.
Well, Jackie and I were colleagues together in a university setting. Is that what you were thinking of, Jackie?
Yes.
For 14, 15 years. And over the years, we sometimes had to deal with some pretty dysfunctional and even, you might say, coercive or abusive leadership issues. As a mediator, I've also often been asked to go into organizations where there was that as well. And to be honest, sometimes as a mediator, the best thing I could do is say, this is not a process with integrity. And I've had to leave. And sometimes that in itself was pretty disruptive. And at other times we were able to name the elephant, to put the issue on the table, to talk about what's really going on, to try to get people to delve more fully into their stories and to try to deal with the power issues. And that doesn't necessarily guarantee change, but it is a step often in the right direction. If you can't do those things, then I think you always have to ask, are you part of a process that has integrity? But as a participant in the organization, I don't know, maybe you want to talk about what it's like, Jackie. You were a real warrior at times on this.
Yes, I think it's hard. This is not a simple, easy solution. Here's the formula. I do think that, yes, absolutely, that is a thing. It is happening more than we even want to admit. And the way I see it is the fact that there has been movements towards positive change from my perspective of people standing up and saying, no, this is not only about white folks or straight cisgender folks. This is about Blacks and women and Latinx. I think the reaction back, the backlash has been strong, which tells me we're advancing somehow, right? Because we're making some people, some folks out there really uncomfortable, and that is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you navigate that? I mean, in my own personal experience, I mean, you need to tap into one or two allies that do represent them, that do look like them, that do have the background that they have, whatever that may be, or have this elitist background, and use those alliances to either get your voice at the table if you're not there, that are advocating for you, that are trying to look at the system level issues. There's consequences. I mean, there's a lot of efforts to try to silence people. I always think if you're in a position of leadership or work, never tell someone not to share your story. I think your role is making them aware of what are some of the potential consequences of sharing the stories, and then how can you support them, what type of safe space they will need, what could they do, will they be needing another job, how do we then look for them? What is it that they need to be able to share that story, and is it the right timing to share the story? But what I see a lot, the way that this kind of power over comes along from this people in positions of power, if I coming to you and saying things like, well, you know what, it may work in your best benefit not to just share that, right? Or it may impact your professional future, or it may impact your tenure if you're in academia. And I think that, you know, one of the ways to navigating that is to being disruptive. There's points in time where, and how do you disrupt the system? I don't know. Do you have the capacity to, in our case, in an academic institution, we started organizing events around issues that would surface the type of things and behavior we were seeing with our institution. And having conversations and dialogue for people to share those spaces. So I think being creative about, we see disruption as, you know, going out and protesting, and that's certainly one way of disrupting. But how can we disrupt within our systems? You know, if you're in academia, how can you disrupt within your courses, the programs, the programmatic events that you do extracurricular? If you are in a healthcare institution or in the legal institution, what can you do to be able to find those allies and push the system? And it's not a walk in the park. It really isn't. What you're asking people is to share their power. And that's really what it's all about. It's about sharing the power they have and letting go of it. Sometimes it's trying to connect with them and say, this is what's in it for you, right? Sometimes it's a pragmatic approach, finding things that they may gain if they decide to go along and make some policy changes. But it's hard. I mean, it's by no means or stretch of an imagination an easy thing to do. I just think it's our responsibility to be able to do it, to set up people for success for these changes to happen.
Mark Laster.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. So I want to just, full disclosure, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a social worker. But I do want to talk about, and Shakira, I think I can give you a good example of how you could promote change. So on my local community board, I live in Queens, we had what a number of us thought was a very dysfunctional community board. So what we did is a number of us got together and we basically changed the leadership. We had an election, this is about 2.5, 3 years ago. And basically there were 7 executive committee members. We pretty much took over. We advocated within the membership. There was a changeover in membership and we were able to take advantage of that. And I will say that part of our disruption was we recruited a woman to run for chair. And I was also among the leaders. I could have run for chair, but I realized it would be much better to have a woman in charge because I just think it was important to have more women in leadership. So I stepped aside, I joined the executive committee, and we were very successful. Now we're 2.5 years into this process, and the change has been amazing. We've gone from, we just had an orientation last night for new community board members for our community board. And I sat there and I remember when I joined the community board in 2016, there was nothing like what we were doing. We've activated all the committees. We've gotten, over the past 2 years, because of our disruption, half the community board has changed over because a lot of the older members saw what we were doing. They didn't agree with the direction or they couldn't keep up with us. So they therefore left the community board. We have now almost 50% of the community board is turned over. So, and Shakira, if you're interested in learning more about how the specifics and how we did that, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. So I just wanted to give an example. And the point is, I think this is very good philosophically, but I think change comes from the grassroots.
Yes.
And what we did on the community board, even though it's a microcosm, it's a very small thing, still it makes a difference. And then that's how you start. I don't think you start by having very large, broad discussions. You need to roll your sleeves up, work on the grassroots. And one of the comments, just in general, is about the women's movement, given what's happening with Roe v. Wade. If people remember the history of the women's movement, you needed both internal disruption and external disruption. That took, what, 50, 100 years? But that's what happened. The people who were externally putting pressure on worked with the people who were internally putting pressure on. And even with that, it barely passed. So just, I wanted to highlight that as a philosophical thing.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Mark. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that change needs to start at that grassroots community level. whether that's in an institution or whether that's in the community itself, right? And that is a great example. And I think it also expresses and shares something we highlighted in our book, which is a lot of the ways to build this grassroots movement is through relationship building and storytelling. If you think about LGBTQ and all the advances that they made in a relatively short period of time, right, for significant changes such as, you know, being able to legally get married, for example, which is a strong change in an institution at a policy level, at a legal level, at a national level, which I know, you know, now there's all circumstances what's going to happen with that after Roe versus Wade. But the issue is it was done through sharing those stories. If you think about when people started that whole campaign, LGBTQ community of coming out, and what it did was they started connecting with people, and all of a sudden their stories of coming out were like, huh, I thought, you know, gays were the most terrible people in the world. And now I know that my brother or sister happens to be gay, right? But I already had a relationship with them. It's really hard to hate someone when you have some sort of connection at that level. So I think one of the ways of building those grassroots movements is actually by encouraging the stories to surface that will lead to a connection, because when those stories and those narratives become forceful enough, and it's like a snowballing effect, right? Then that's when they kind of start coming into our institutional policies and into our legal framework. It doesn't happen from the law down, it happens from the grassroots movement up. And that's a role that I think facilitators and mediators and people in our field have the skills to actually encourage that to happen and make it happen.
So I would just like to add to that two things. One is the problem with talking about systems change is people don't think about in systems terms often, and it often people's eyes glaze over. So what you're always looking for are two things. One is the individual stories that crystallize the issue in a way that people can make sense of it. And that's certainly the LGBTQ community's history is a great example of that. The women's movement's history is too. I suspect as we go forward in dealing with issues of reproductive rights, reproductive choice, we're going to have a lot of storytelling in grassroots movements all over the country about experiences people have. The other thing is to find the issue, as this relates to something that was said earlier, that really people do feel as tangible as what they really need is their thing in the concrete present that helps build a larger consciousness. And almost all movements that we can think about, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the labor movement, the environmental movement, have this element of thinking immediately, thinking locally, thinking personally, but in doing it in a way that connects to the broader systemic issues and generally raises consciousness about that. And that's always been a major part of what helps people build movements for change. And it's also a major part of what helps people reach across their differences. Mm-hmm. It's not to immediately focus on the largest issue, but on what really connects them and what they can get together on. And there's a lot of stories we could tell about that.
All right, thank you both. Miriam.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to Maria and her team for bringing us together. Because I didn't know you, Bernie and Jackie, and I'm very glad to have been listening to you and to be also inspired by what you've been telling us. I'm a 60s person. I suspect I'm not the only one here on this screen that was trained in a more Alinsky, Cloward and Piven way of doing community organization and social disruption. What I appreciate now is not only the call to bring my full self to the table, but I also want to ask you how we take the element of connection, which we didn't have in the 60s. I don't think we understood how important it is to have compassion and connection with the people who are social adversaries. But how do we do that? I would appreciate if you could give us one example that, and I'll buy the book anyway, but I would appreciate if you can give us an example of what you mean by that and how that might work. Because sometimes I think when we look at Ukraine, when we look at what's happening with Roe v. Wade, we despair. And we think these people, we can never connect with. How do we even reach them? Storytelling is powerful, but will they listen?
So
So
here's,
help me.
Can I just say this, and I just want to say, I was a student of Cloward Piven at Columbia University. I'm really,
Okay.
it really makes me happy to hear their names again. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, no, and I got arrested with their guidance, in 1968. So I worked very closely with them.
so I will, yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for sharing all of this, Miriam. I think, first of all, let's start with defining what connection, right? What do we mean by that? And relationship building. I like the analogy that I've heard before, which is when we think about relationship building, we usually we see it as a one, either we have it or we don't. And I see it as a continuum. If one is a relationship you have with the person you meet at a grocery store, you don't even know them, but you tell them, man, just go ahead. You have less items than I do in my cart. That's a relationship. It's a 2-second relationship. You may never see that person, but it's an interaction, right? And if you see 10 as your dearest friend, your significant other, your best friend, the one you go and share, your messy divorce or your pains, that would be a 10. We don't need a 10 to affect change, right? So I think one of the things is when we're talking about connection, what kind of connection are we talking about? What's the intensity of the connection? Honestly, we probably need a 2 or a 3. We don't need to go all the way to that relationship, but we can't stay at the casual encounter either. So that's one thing. So once that I know what I'm talking about when I'm connecting, how do I go about it? I am actually very intentional to do it don't wait for the chaos to set in, right? Like I try, let me just give an example within my institution. 2, what is my sphere of influence? I would love to go and have Ukraine be in peace and, Russia and the bullies that are there right now, be gone. It's not under my sphere of influence to do that right now, right? So the other thing is I'm connecting within whatever my sphere of influence is. And that is part of the system. I am part of the system. So now that I know those 2 things, what am I going to do about it? One of the things I do institutionally is I very, very intentionally put on my calendar meeting with someone. The goal is 1 week. It's usually every other week with someone that I feel within my institution has very different ways of thinking than I do. And I'll give you a concrete example. I work at right now since last year at an Eastern Mennonite University, which is a Mennonite Anabaptist institution, which has a horrible story of having discriminated against openly LGBTQ faculty, staff, and students, to the point that some of them in 1995 were fired when they decided to come out. Since then, policy has changed. They have shifted. That is no longer the situation. Many people resigned as a result of this, right? Faculty and staff that felt really strongly that this was a sin or for whatever reason, they weren't on board with it, left. They're still in spaces and areas where that people still feel like, no, this is wrong. I ask, what are the faculty? Who are the faculty and who are the staff members that we know that openly are or think that this is not okay? And I schedule coffee with them throughout my first 6 months, one-on-one connection, just to get to know them. I don't want to convince them. I'm not going to make them change their mind by telling them you and I don't agree. Just connecting. What do you like to do? Who are you? What do you teach? What are you passionate about? That's what we did. The conversations later about other things, they could either surface or not. And that's what I mean, because a year or 2 down the road, when something comes out, which it has been, right now we're celebrating our first lavender ceremony, right? If those people or a group of people who may be against that, it's a different take on when they have a relationship with you. They will reach out and say, can we have a conversation? Because I don't agree with this, or can we shift this? And that's a different dynamic than just attacking each other or being in different positions. So I use that kind of like three kind of like, what connection am I aiming for? What is my sphere of influence? What is my end goal here? And be authentic. And be authentic with that relationship. I met with these people because I am authentically interested in knowing who they are and what they do, because they're colleagues, right? And what makes it not work is if you're trying to force an 8 or 10 relationship and then it comes across as being unauthentic. If I really don't connect with that person, or I really don't feel like I can even have a conversation, then start with the one. Good morning, how are you doing? Move on, right? Whatever you're doing, be authentic about that level of intensity that you want to engage with. So that's one thing I try to do. Not perfect, probably do it better. But it's a way of me being strategic about systemic change and connecting with people in authentic ways. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Well, I see several hands up, so I think Francine, were you next, I believe?
I'll be next. So I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the ideas as from the point of view of an interested party, as well as from the point of view of a mediator. And I do have a question, but I just want to say something, if I may. I did something of the same thing where I sat down with someone I knew who I know very well and is very dear to me, who's very pro-life. And it wasn't to change his mind. It was to understand the perspective and to understand where it came from, and to see the folly of some of my own perception of what I felt about how I view people in his political camp. And I learned a lot, and I changed a lot. Didn't change my point of view about the law, but it gave me great insight about how short-sighted I am, who I think is so open-minded about stuff. So I think that kind of exercise can be done with a lot of different kinds of things. I think it's essential for people to try to do who work in our field. The question I have is, I'm trying to see how, I guess I have the book already, so I don't have to go out and buy it. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But when you apply these kinds of theories as a third party, as a mediator, what has it looked like, and what might it look like? And one of the questions I have is, or that I always have as a mediator, is, naming the elephant or naming something that isn't in the room is often where the solution is. But sometimes I'm wondering if I'm broadening it to a point where people, it's like, what are you talking about? This isn't even relevant to us in a thoughtful way, really. And I'm the one who's not being thoughtful enough. So I don't know if either of those if any of this makes sense, but I think I'm trying to see how you apply it, how you have applied it, an example of how this has worked or not worked in a real life situation. And now I'll be quiet.
Well, no, that was great. It seems to me that the problem with the metaphor of naming the elephant is you think of an elephant as a really big thing that's there at everybody's. But we shouldn't assume we know better what the elephant is than other people. We have our own views, and we have a way, especially if we're in the mediator role, we can inquire to see whether that's the direction it needs to go in, and sometimes we do have to name it. And for example, as a third party, I've often had to name issues that had related to race or gender that obviously people were dealing with. And at other times I had to ask them whether they think it's an issue and whether they wanted to raise it. But oftentimes what I have thought was the elephant, for example, was not. It was, maybe a mouse or something. It was I'm going to kill that metaphor. But so sometimes figuring out what is the real issue is the whole purpose of the mediation. or the facilitation. It really is hard work. And you can just to take it down to a family context for a moment, we know that oftentimes people come to us with stuff that isn't the real issue, like who gets the kids over Christmas holiday, for example. But it's I think of a conflict where that was a real issue that people really fought about, and they were all Jewish. So, you know, it was really what was a real issue, and you can speculate what it was, but helping them name it is often much more powerful than us being the ones to name it. And it's sometimes very surprising as to what it is.
Okay, Richard Sussman. Richard, are you still there? Yes, you are. Unmute yourself and maybe even turn your camera on.
Let's go to Vivian while we're waiting for Richard.
Good.
Vivian?
Okay, hi. So I'm not, I guess I'm very discouraged about what's is happening. I have a son who's a Trumpy, which many people know that. And I also have a girlfriend who is a Trumpy. And the only thing they really want is for me to listen. They don't really want to hear anything what I want to say. Nothing. So the minute I try to say something, then it becomes a conflict. If I listen, then I'm a good person. So I don't mind listening because I'm always shocked, you know, the point of view. So I listen. But here with this Roe versus Wade, I mean, okay, I'm going to protest. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. I'm going to protest. But there are laws already in place, you know, so it's like, so I'm very discouraged in terms of, I mean, and people have killed and abortion doctors have been killed and all that. So there has been a lot of violence. So I am very, very discouraged about this. And I'm very glad that person leaked the draft. Anyway, that's it.
Okay.
Well, I think you're raising two very difficult and important issues. One is, I sometimes think listening is the easiest part of genuine communication. It's not easy, and it's hard work, and you have to struggle, and especially when you're hearing stuff that's really painful, like you're talking about. The other part is how do we speak our truths in a way that other people can hear them? And that is very hard, and it's not always possible in a two-wayness as you describe, but that's what our work is all, in many ways, is all about, is really deep listening and also helping people, including ourselves, speak our truths. And it's hard to do. And the other thing you raise is how do we maintain a sense of hope? We say in the book at one point that optimism is almost a moral imperative, but it's not phony optimism. It has to be realistic optimism. It's optimism that we can make a difference. And this isn't the first time we've been through hard times. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that's very fundamental to what we have to do if we're going to try to deal with some of the fundamental problems we face in our world and our lives.
I tend, when I'm looking for some hope, to remind myself that these processes are not linear. And we all know that, right? This is not an evolutionary process of like one thing and then two and then three and then four, and then we finally reach, where we need to reach. That it's a pendulum, and we go back and we go forth and we go. And so, when we're at the lowest, what are the moments where we can be at the highest, and it will come back, right? We won't stay stuck in that space of despair and low end. And so that's kind of, how I keep on going. And I do think that I really authentically, at the end of the day, believe that we can make a difference. If we all work within our spheres of influence, we can have a larger effect than ourselves. We can be part of something larger than ourselves.
I just want to say two things. One is that not a lot of time to practice what you're saying, but I really think we are Jacqueline, I think it's very naive today with social media and with all the big bucks and all that. I'm just not, I'm going to try to be optimistic, but based on, all the realities, we're not living in the same time as we were before. There are just so many factors, money, social media and all that are beyond our control, but I hope I'm wrong.
Richard, Julie, you're muted. Richard, are you there? We can't hear you.
He's been trying to get his audio on.
I think he's having challenges with his audio, yeah.
I'm sympathetic. My screen keeps changing. Okay. Are there any other questions that I have missed?
I was going to raise one. Would you be willing to share how you think mediators should be prepared to deal with this new agenda that you're putting on the table for peacemakers and mediators amongst those on that continuum of trying to bring peace?
How they should prepare themselves to deal with it?
Well, I mean, we know that for years now, there's been I can't say a standard curriculum, but mediators we talk about training mediators, and the expectation is that there are some core concepts and core things that need to be shared. How would this new perspective get layered on top of that more traditional training so that mediators are leaving with a better understanding of their role as neutrals?
Well, I'd say
neutrals in quotes.
Three things. First of all, I think that a lot of mediation training has dealt with some of this. And the way it's dealt with some of this is by dealing with the issues of power and power differentials and issues of diversity and some of the ways that, and also trying to help mediators understand system dynamics. I mean, and if programs aren't training them in that and aren't addressing that and aren't getting conversations about that, then they're missing out on something. And so I think it's really building that into a very powerful part of the training. And what do you do when you're really seeing major power differentials and understanding to recognizing it and analyzing it and practicing and dealing with it. And so that's one thing. And another thing I would simply say as an exercise, this is a really small one, but try having people do their introduction of themselves without using the word neutrality, impartiality, bias, multi-partiality, without any of those words, and talk about what we really offer and see what you have, because it's pretty powerful. What we really offer, it's not that stuff that has much more to do with how we market ourselves. What we really offer is something different than those things. And I think if you try to help people understand that and talk about it in that way, you'll find it's not as big a stretch as I think as we might think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I will echo that. Formation matters, and what I am seeing, especially as we've been talking about the book, but even in other communities, like here in Virginia, they're revisiting and revamping their mediation trainings and trying to look and borrow from grassroots movements and community movements as to how they can make and contribute to making structural changes, even though it's still an individual, right? A mediator is sitting with one person or two or three to solve an individual problem, but they're starting to look as to how they can tease out how is it nested into other larger societal problems. So I think I've been seeing a lot of mediators and facilitators and programs looking into, it's a time now for one of those like major revisions as to the forms that we're using, how we are framing what we do, how are we conducting the process. I actually think it's a wonderful opportunity to move us as a profession and as a discipline to the next level and continue to strengthen ourselves. I actually don't see it in that way, it's a challenge, but I see it more as an opportunity, that there's more and more questioning about how we should do things, and that is okay, and that doesn't mean that we've been doing things wrong, or that doesn't mean that we don't have a contribution. It's just where we are right now and where we want to go. I'm also starting to see this is a very white profession. Like historically, it's been a very white. Our organizations, our institutions, ABA, Association for Conflict Resolution. Historically, most of the leaders have been white. And we're starting to see some shift on that, right? I mean, and I think that that's also a recognition to starting to recognize that there's some power to be shared, right? What do our board of trustees look like in all of these organizations? If you have our advisory boards that you may have within your institutions, you know, take a look at that. What are some things that you may want to change? So I think it's an opportunity, actually.
There's a comment in the chat, Bernie, particularly about referring to us as third parties rather than mediators. I wonder if you might elaborate on that.
What does the comment say? That they think that
It just says that you're referring to us as third parties rather than mediators.
Well, I think it's fine to refer to us as mediators, as that's what we do. I think the third party role encompasses more than just mediation. It can encompass, you know, helping people with systems design, facilitation, sort of and even therapy sometimes. So I tend to use a more general role, and more general than that even is we're allies. So that's why I use it that way. But I'm not against the term mediation. I just
Okay.
that's specifically what we're doing.
We've suddenly have a host of people who want to ask questions, and we've got about 3 minutes. Let's go to someone who hasn't spoken yet. I'm sorry, can someone else take over? My screen keeps.
Richard Brigham.
Thank you. And Maria, I actually wanted to follow up on your question with a reference to Bernie and Jackie's second chapter that I think would be the kernel of a curriculum to address this skill set that you're talking about. And that is the quote from Desmond Tutu. It's very powerful. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And I think that really speaks to the enormity of the challenge. It's not, we can label the differential of power, but I don't know if we really can imagine the enormity of the difference of power in the parties better than that reference.
Thank you. Let's go back to Richard Sussman.
Oh, wait. Oh, well, yeah, good. Richard, are you there yet?
I'm going to lower his hand.
Okay, Robin Beckart. Robin?
Oh, thank you, Julia. I was just going to say that for the conversation about labeling ourselves as neutral and presenting ourselves as neutral or impartial, when I'm conducting a mediation and doing my introduction, I will always say that my role as a mediator is to be an impartial facilitator of the conversation, and I'm a human being. So if I feel anything that is not impartial, it is my absolute responsibility not to show that. And if anyone feels that I'm showing a preference, that they should call me out on it. I don't know. That's a distinction that I've been comfortable with.
Great. Any others? Well, Bernie and Jackie, this has been wonderful. There are a lot of very complimentary comments in the chat. This will be made available to you. Maria, you can talk about the mechanics of it.
Nikki will be posting the link to this session at the ACR-GMY website in the next few days. She will also download the chat, and those of you who are on the call, feel free to visit that website. Thank you so much for coming. Usually we hang around for a few minutes, Bernie and Jackie, if you have a few minutes to hang out informally. Some of you have asked us to keep the recording going during that informal chat. We do officially adjourn this meeting at 10 o'clock, so we are going to turn off the recording. The last time we heard that we should keep it going, but we'd like to keep the session formal up until 10 and return to an informal chat format for a few more minutes. Thank you, everyone, for coming. See you in June.
Thank you very much for inviting us. I really.
Yeah, thanks for the
Yeah,
invitation.
thank you.
There are a host of thank yous, and this was really important in the chat.
Thanks for the big questions that some of you were able to ask.
Right. Thanks again.
Great,
for
thanks so
really
much.